My poor little children, one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its situation, with its governor having his lips lifted to the words of the position in Mississippi. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with this faith. We will be able to go out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the dungeon discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go in jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day.
This will be the day.
All across the be able to sing with new meaning, my patriotism. Sweet land of liberty of PRK. Land where my fathers died, land of the beautiful cry. From every mountainside, let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the forbidding hilltops of New York, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring from the hiking Allegheny to the Queen. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped mountains of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the deserts of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from the snowy mountains of
Yes.
Let freedom ring
Yes.
from the lookout mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from
Get the boogie on in the morning. Good morning, my brother. Hello.
Good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you today?
Good.
Yes. Blessings. Good to see you.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
All right. I had this idea, man. How about we do a little breathing exercise before we get started? Is that okay?
I'm into it.
Great. We'll do a little grounding. Happy Black History Month. This is wonderful. All right, then. Let's take a deep breath. Let's take another deep breath at your pace. Notice that you're in a body right here, right now, on this beautiful, gorgeous day. Everything exists as it is, and here we are in togetherness and oneness, in peace. All right. Yes. Good morning, my brother.
Good
Thomas
morning.
Pedersen, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
Thank you. I think it should be a Happy Black History Month and future.
Exactly.
What do you think about that?
This is just, Happy Black History Month and future to you too. I think this is just the starting point, right? It should be, Black history should be U.S. history.
See, there you go. I like that. People say Black History 24/7. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, that's just reality.
That's right. And really, and to look again to the future, everyone's history should be celebrated, learned about, taught about, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to see the news just about my local area. I want to see the news about the entire world. I want to know what's going on, right?
Yeah. 100%, 100%.
Yes. All right, so let's jump into it. So today, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for being with me. So today, well, why don't we give a little introduction to who you are, who I am. My name is Taj. Hello, everyone. I am a part of the Santa Cruz County Black Coalition for Justice and Racial Equity. And Thomas is on the steering committee for that group. Yes. And thank you for stepping up to do all of that.
Of course.
That's right. We're working at it.
About it.
That's right. But also you were a part of Everyone's Music School. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Everyone's Music School. We have 2 locations, one in Pleasure Point and one in the Tannery Arts. And we have
here in Santa Cruz.
Here in Santa Cruz, right? A bunch of teachers there.
And real quick, what do you guys do at Everyone's Music School?
Well, our mission is to create positive and lasting change in people's lives with music education. So we teach music, all ages, and we really take that mission pretty seriously. We really customize everything to everybody and try to really find ways of making a deeper impact on kids' lives and adults' lives.
Yeah. I was going to say, because if I need to learn how to play the bass, can I come to you?
That's right. You can.
Okay. Get my boogie on. All right. That's great. Okay, good. Well, I wanted to give a little preface as to why I asked you to speak today and what this is all about. So as you and I both are involved in political, local activities, hopefully soon to be national activities, you know, a lot of different things come up. Some of them are wonderful and great, and some of them are not. And it's some of the things that have come up recently that made me think, what are we doing? How do we further our movement in a good way? Excuse me. And you know, as you and I were talking, I was actually on your podcast recently.
That's right.
And you know, you said something that made my ears perk up, and it was Kingian Nonviolence, and I had to be like, oh yeah. What is Kingian Nonviolence? And so we had that conversation.
That's right.
And I do remember you saying, oh, you calling me out, because I'm like, look, we need to talk more about this. I think what you have to offer for the community, for the world, for myself, is going to be a huge benefit. So I'm very, very happy to hear what you have to say today, Thomas, and to be with you right now, my man. Thank you.
No, man, thank you for having me on. And that being said, you know, we're going to talk about Kingian Nonviolence. I don't know when we're going to speak on that, but you know, this is not my specific thing. You know, I learned it I went to Selma with Drew Glover at the Selma Center for Nonviolence.
Drew Glover was a former council member here.
Former council member in Santa Cruz. And he is, amazing about this. And I've done a lot of reading on it, and from my training, because I got certified in it, right? I've done a lot of work with it in my own personal life, right? In my business, and, you know, hopefully more protests in the future and organizing efforts.
Sure. So you're saying that you not only use these techniques in the social justice world, but also in your personal life.
Oh yeah. So that's the thing about Kingian Nonviolence, right? It's, you know, if you just look at Kingian Nonviolence is a outgrowth of a bunch of ideologies, you know, from Gandhi, Tulsi, Thoreau, and MLK kind of meshed together in this perspective of how we can handle conflict with each other. And it was put together by Bernard Lafayette Jr. and David C. Jensen, who worked alongside MLK during the movement. So they kind of decided to make it their mission to systemize Kingian nonviolence into the society. And so that being said, it is like Martin Luther King, right? He lived supposedly, you know, he lived his principles, right? He lived that, or he tried to live up to those principles. And, you know, his faith drove a lot of this, but also, and that inspired him to, you know, nonviolence is the way. He was really inspired by Gandhi. And so, yeah, you can apply these principles everywhere.
So I love it. I love it. And I got questions for you. I'm going to try to call you out as much as I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I think for myself, I am curious as to what, you know, Kingian nonviolence is and what it isn't.
Right.
And I think also there's a part of me that says, well, but does that mean that I can never be violent? Does that mean that I have to take that tool, because violence is a tool, or can be? Do I have to take that tool off of my plate? You know, what does that really mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's the most dangerous thought when thinking of anything like Kingian nonviolence, right? And from the get-go, when I did the training, they were very specific. How they differentiate between the idea of nonviolence, the socially accepted idea of nonviolence, just like not fighting or not being violent, is that they take the hyphen out, right, of the word. They make it one word, nonviolence, rather than non-hyphenated violence. And they use that as a way to teach that this is not something, it's not just the absence of violence. And so a good example of that is, let's say you see two people fighting in front of you, right? There's all these people watching, you know, um, non-violence, non-hyphenated violence, those people watching are practicing non-hyphenated violence, right? They're not doing anything, right?
Okay.
Non-violence, one word, is where you actually you have to do something about this in a way that is brings reconciliation or conflict resolution, some kind of way of handling the situation in a creative way. Even if that means just going in, putting yourself in harm's way to break up that fight, even, and that is where these principles come from. Right.
So then let me ask you this. Those, let's say, for the example that you gave, would those people that didn't interact, would they be what would be called pacifists?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, and to my understanding of that word, I guess that is pacifist like mentality.
So is Kingian nonviolence pacifist?
I wouldn't call it pacifist. I would call it something you act. It's an action. It's a strategy. It's a list of strategies of how to go about it. So this was, I'm going to quote Gandhi here, and Gandhi said, "I do believe that where there's only a choice between cowardice and violence, I would advise violence." And so, yeah, you're welcome, everybody.
Yeah, look, wait, hold on.
Yeah, no, I'll go there, right? But
I mean, what?
Yeah. So basically, Gandhi, I think, saw that perception of his work as being kind of, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to let people hurt us for no apparent reason. But it was a strategy. In Gandhi's case, he was faced against the whole British army, and he knew that he had tons of people in India, but he knew that he couldn't fight them physically, right? If all the people in India started fighting the British army, they just send their more army over and over again.
Right.
So it's like, we need to do something sustainable to create this change. And so then he tried to find a small, doable goal, like salt, right? His whole thing was salt, right? He was like, they're taxing salt. We should be able to have access to salt.
Yes.
And so a lot of people went around that, and he said, we can't fight back violently though, or else we won't win. We won't win this. And so that's what he did. He allowed people and himself to be put in harm's way and physically harmed to highlight the injustice of the British rule, the colonizing rule.
Just thinking about that and knowing of that event in history, and thinking of the lunch counter sit-ins,
right?
And what it would mean to put yourself, to put myself on the line in front of an army, people with batons, people with fists, people with dogs and water hoses. That sounds scary AF, man. I'm like, wait, what?
Yes.
That's a very big commitment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that is where, this is a strategy, right? This is a way of making, I think, sustainable change. I think going to violence, and this may be controversial, I think it's easier. If you're angry, you say angry things. And I think violent speech is powerful. And definitely this year, I've noticed in these past 4 years, to be specific, the power of speech, the power of words, right? And intent. And violent speech is important. So
yes,
I guess my point is that it's harder, yes, but it will create sustainable change. I mean, if you look at wars, right? Wars are fought, then they create more wars. I mean, one country feels humiliated, alienated from the world.
Mhm.
and then they get up and they start another war. But if you look at all the nonviolent resistance that's happening, it's probably more actual change, positive change that has occurred because of those actions. I mean, just the sit-ins, just the civil rights movement. Look at that. We're here now. My
Right.
wife is white. Like I wouldn't have been able to
Me
do that without
too.
MLK. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so I guess I think if we want sustainable change in our society, we need to think more creatively about how we do it, and we need to start training ourselves to be able to handle things and figure out different creative solutions and ways of getting it done.
You're saying so many things, man. I'm writing furiously, man. I'm like, I want to catch that other thing you said. I mean, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here today, because I feel like, again, what we're talking about today is a way to, as you said, think creatively about how we're going to move forward.
Right.
And how we are going to make our little world a better place. And something that I tend to talk about is that we've done war. I can
Right.
fight. I come from the hood. I'm down with that. I got that. That's a thing.
Right.
But I have seen how so often, and if you study any little bit of history, or if you look even at the current news,
Right.
war, violence is the it's the it's nouveau. It's like,
Mhm.
this is what's happening. This is what we're doing. This is what has been done. Let's do something different. And so that's why I
Right.
wanted to have you here today. And to go back to what you were saying about, let's say, verbal violence.
Right.
There have been ways in which I myself have used my voice in ways that are harmful to people. So when we're talking about violence,
Yeah.
we're not just talking about bombs and guns. We're talking about the way that we actually interact with each other. Do you have
Yes.
anything to say about that? Or does Kingian Nonviolence have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so they were pretty explicit on when I was going through the training that verbal violence and internal violence is a really big thing. And so
Okay, I'm
be
writing that down. Hold on now.
yeah. Yeah. So, when it comes to internal violence, like, I think we as a culture don't really recognize and I mean our society, like the American society, meritocracy, the idea of how our thoughts and our intentions and our words and our actions actually can affect us negatively, internally and spiritually, not taking care of ourselves, right? Self-care. I mean, I know I'm connecting this
Wow.
weird uh, world, but self-care allows us to understand ourselves, allows us to understand how we react to the world around us. And when we're doing any kind of social justice work, we need to be able to be okay, so that we can know that our personal commitment is strong enough to be able to highlight these injustices that we see in our world, right?
Yes, absolutely. And as you said, violence is easy.
Yes.
That's It's easy. Not for everybody,
Right.
but for, I think, a lot of people it is. It's almost the default,
Yeah,
it
it's
seems.
the norm, right?
The
It's
norm.
it's it's where we go. I think when someone yells at me personally, even if I don't react violently, sometimes I feel like I want to react violently, right? You know, and I think in our society, or I know in our society, we go straight to violence without exercising a lot of interesting creative endeavors that we've never even looked at. So when going down this path, it really does feel like you're going down a path of unknown, unexplorable
Yes.
things, even though there's actually a lot of resources out there showing us a bunch of nonviolent resistance that has occurred in different countries.
But we have to switch that in our mind, and that's exactly why we're talking today. I feel like this is a gift to our community. It's Black History Month, and one of the great Black leaders, orators, spiritual leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King.
That's right.
He lived this ideology. He
Yeah.
gave us this tool to work with, and I feel like it's something that I wanted to understand better.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so thank you so much for being here. This is just
Hey,
wonderful.
brother. No, and in talking about King, so this is very King heavy, right? This train, it's Kingian nonviolence, right? So we take from these different ideologies, but it is kind of shown in the lens of King and his writings and his speeches, right? So we have our principles of nonviolence and we have the steps of Kingian nonviolence. So there's actually actionable things. And do you mind if I read you the principles?
Go, please. Yes,
All right,
thank
cool. So principle number 1 is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, right? So that's principle number 1. Number 2 is the beloved community is
Wait,
the
hold
frame.
on, hold on, wait, hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. You
Yeah.
know,
No, yeah.
as I think about that, you say that, off the cuff, and I'm like,
I
wait,
know.
say that again, man.
Yeah, no, so I'll repeat that, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. So that's the first one.
Amen. Yeah,
Because what we're talking about, violence, you can't go into these things without a level of courage because you're going to probably get hurt. And that you can't react in the way that your society has kind of deemed it okay. We have self-defense laws, we have all these things,
sure.
and
Castle doctrine.
yeah, right. Yep, exactly, right. And I think that takes a humongous amount of courage, definitely in different parts of the United States, to do.
Wow,
Like
I'm feeling called up right now. That's good.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
and that kind of leads, like, why are we doing this, right? What's the point of doing this? And that's where the second principle comes in. It's the beloved community is the framework of the future, right? And so the beloved community is what Martin Luther King talked about a lot, where where it's a presence of justice in our society, right? A presence of justice, of equity, and I'm adding the equity part to that. That wasn't really a term, I don't think, back in King's time.
Sure.
I think it was mostly equality.
Okay, yeah.
And so the beloved community where we all can live in this, and I don't think of it as like a utopia as much, because I'm not really into the idea of no struggle, no conflict, that kind of deal, but rather we have a way of handling those conflicts in a lens of justice and equity and understanding and empathy, right? And so that's the second one.
So
And
beloved community.
right. So that's kind of like the why.
Okay, and is that saying just your community?
No, the beloved
Only Black people?
Only Black. Martin Luther King. This is Kingian Nonviolence. Beloved community in King's eyes was everybody, right? It wasn't
Everybody.
just an isolated one race. Race is a concept made up to divide, and that we have adopted in our society from the founding, right? And it's enriched in our society. So it's an illusion. So when Martin Luther King,
Separation is an illusion.
yeah,
Are we going
exactly.
there?
You're
All right.
going there, and because
Okay.
that's what Martin Luther King believed. And, I believe that with him. I think if you just look at the world, if you look at science, we're all connected.
Yes.
Even if we like it or not, we're all human. We're all the same species here,
That's right.
but we've built these crazy ideologies as a society. And when I say we, I really do mean, I still have racist tendencies in myself. I still have, these things. I'm not immune to this, and no one's immune to this. So when I mention Kingian nonviolence, I think of it like a practice, right? These are
Okay.
things like you practice. There's no something, oh, I got this, right?
Yeah.
None
Yeah.
of that, right? It's a practice. It's a martial arts. And I know me and you talked a lot about martial
Yes.
arts. And Kazu Haga, who wrote Healing Resistance, which is another book I recommend everyone to listen to, who dives so deep into Kingian nonviolence, talks about it like a martial art and like a training ground. Like, these are steps to train yourself to be able to make positive change.
I'm just putting in the chat healing resistance, so folks can look that up if they want to.
Perfect.
So now we're on the third principle.
Yeah. So the third principle is probably my favorite. It's attack forces of evil, not the people doing the evil. And it's my favorite because it's probably the one I remind myself constantly.
Sure.
And, and if you throw the word evil, I know evil is kind of an extreme word.
It's a big word.
And I don't necessarily look at it that way. I look at, when you're talking with people you disagree with, look at the conditions rather than blaming the person, right?
Okay.
When I'm having conversations with people, I never personally attack them. I never say, why didn't you do this or that? I always say, like, why is this happening? Why is this and this happening? Your actions did this or that, why that? Because, like it or not, we are not all perfect, right? We all we've all been kind of brainwashed at some level. If we learn how we understand the world is by looking and communicating with each other and looking at the world through our collective lens, right? And if we are in disagreement all the time and not and blaming each other rather than having empathy for someone who may be just potentially be brainwashed, uh that we won't get anywhere in
Right.
our world. And
Right.
I think Martin Luther King had something about that. We'll either all, I forgot the quote, I'm going to butcher it, but it's, we'll perish together as fools or something like that.
Completely butchering it, but I think we
Yeah,
all know what
you know
you're
what I'm saying.
saying.
Yeah, but basically we need each other, right? We need each
Absolutely.
other.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Fourth principle.
The fourth principle is this one's probably one of the most controversial. Accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal.
You see me shaking my head? Nope. Got enough suffering.
Yeah. So that one is, so when you really dive deep into that one, you have to really look at the wording. Accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal. Right.
Wow.
So you have to know what you're fighting for. And I think this one comes with it. And this is with the steps of nonviolence, is a personal commitment to whatever cause that is, and knowing that that cause is worth it. You're really committed to that cause. And like we're talking about the sit-ins, those people had to make a personal commitment to not retaliate, to highlight an injustice, to highlight what I call the power of the opposite, right? They stood there calm while people were screaming at them, yelling at them, pouring coffee on them, pouring water on them, trying to get them to move.
Sure.
But they stayed stoic, like, right? They stayed still and did not react negatively. And what that did was highlight the other person's behavior. It acted as like a mirror. And so this step is probably the most important, but it's the most hard to do, because we all suffer from various amounts of trauma, I believe. And, it's hard to think that. And that is why I stress the importance of the cause and the goal, right?
Yes.
So that's first. Then you should be able to accept suffering without retaliation. And so that is it's controversial, but if you look at history and look at these movements, these people were courageous, right? That was the first principle. They're courageous
Courage.
because of this reason.
Sure.
So that's the
I'm loving this. My mind is full already. We're only on the fourth principle. I'm like, okay, so accept suffering. One of the benefits I can see of that is that I think we're phobic to pain.
That's right.
And it's like whatever I can do to not feel anything sometimes.
Yeah.
When you think of addiction, when you think of rates of suicide, when you think of all these different things that people are like, I'm over feeling, I don't want to feel. Or if you think of sort of toxic masculinity,
Right.
some of that is I feel like you could slot that into suffering.
Yeah.
So to accept suffering has so many layers, because that could mean I need to actually get vulnerable.
Yep.
Which itself is a word that people don't even, the V word, right? I don't want to be vulnerable. That means it might hurt. And so,
Yeah.
just the first part of this principle, accept suffering, and then that's enough right there. But then
Right.
to put on top of it without retaliation. Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
That's the
Wow.
kicker.
So
That's the
somebody's
kicker.
coming at me on the street with some BS,
Yeah.
and I can't say nothing back.
Well, this is where for the sake of the cause to achieve the goal, right? You have to look at the whole thing. What's your
Gotcha.
cause when someone yells at you,
Sure.
And for me, I would be like, what, I've definitely been yelled at, and I just know I have to act in a place of courage. That's what I tell myself. I have to act in a place of courage. What is the courageous thing to do right now? And when I worked at a mental health institution where I had to deal with a lot of people with schizophrenic disorders and stuff like that, people would come at me violently sometimes, and we weren't allowed to fight back. That was a rule. It was because it was housing. They were more free. They weren't like locked down, right?
Okay.
So I couldn't like take them down or anything like that. So I had to actually practice this kind of ideology in life. So someone would come at me, and I'd have to find creative ways of de-escalating that situation. And one of the ways someone came at me yelling and screaming, if there was a chair by, I would sit down.
Wow.
I'd just sit down and breathe and be like, hey, what's going on? Like they're trying to mirror something. And usually that would calm them down, because they would mirror the behavior. They would be going from overt level of violence and hatred and anger to suddenly slowly starting to simmer down because I wasn't matching their pace. So there's a lot of things we can do in our own behavior where we can de-escalate situations, and if anything, we can actually build a connection with the person we are talking with, or the person who started that violent altercation.
Yes, yes, and then that's where it comes back to the cause. You and I,
Yeah.
we're talking about social justice, but
Yeah,
really, again, as we said in the beginning, this can apply to our daily lives.
that's right.
Again, if I'm out on the street and someone's coming at me with something crazy, if I can transmute that interaction into one of a more loving relationship, that could
Yeah,
change or save someone's life.
that's correct. And I don't know, you have that. So when I feel like I'm about to fight, I get adrenaline rush, I get that fight or flight response. Why not try to put that energy into something interesting and creative and something new, rather than something just like swinging, and
Yes,
because that person could be having they could be mentally ill, they could be having these crazy episodes, they could be doing all this stuff, and maybe just you reacting the way they did, it surprises them just enough, it disrupts them
yes.
just enough to them to reflect. And that is what Martin Luther King wanted people to do, was to disrupt their flow, disrupt their normal view of the world just enough for them to see the humanity of the person they may be attacking.
Which is, it means, it could mean the world.
Right.
It really could. When we talk about wars, and sort of the big violence that can occur
Right.
in our world, it's my convicted belief that that starts with individuals. That starts with my thoughts, my words, my actions, my intent, that
Exactly.
build and they spread. And so if I can not war with my
Hmm.
energy, then instead, if I am loving with my energy, then
Right.
that can do just as big things. And I think that's where, again, that courage comes in, is that
Yeah.
I have the courage to believe that the world can actually be a better place. We see war, we know war. So much of the world is at war. I'm at war within myself at
Mhm.
various times throughout the day. And so if I can change that, if I can transmute that, and that's why these techniques are important. And that's why, studying someone like King,
Right.
it's not just the speeches. In the beginning, I was playing the his "I Have a Dream" speech, is some house music, a great, great, great track, and a great speech. But a lot of times people stop there. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
yes, I have a dream. That's so good." I'm like, "Yeah, but there was so much more to that, man.
So
So
much,
much more."
so much more.
Yeah. And another thing, as I'm telling you, I'm writing all these notes furiously. I can't
Yeah.
look back over this. As you were speaking, you said something about de-escalating and matching people's energy, or sitting down instead of standing up or getting bigger,
Right.
because we do have that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
I've been in many meetings where somebody
Yeah.
will start attacking a
Yeah.
person, instead of really talking it out or dealing with
Right.
policies and things like this. This is part of why I wanted to have this conversation as well, to
Right.
have more strategy, so that when we are in the political arena, that we
Yeah.
can have more tools under our belt in order to deal with some of the divisiveness that does occur.
Yeah. No, and I completely agree. So these principles are just the overview, right? And there's steps and there's a bunch of different things, but I'm just going to kind of step away from the principles just for a second to kind
Okay.
of share with you kind of what other ways that happens. Let's say there's an altercation in a meeting or anything like that. The first thing you want to understand when there's a conflict is, what kind of conflict is it? Right? And that's kind of, I think, a big deal. And something that not many people I've talked to really understand. And I think just being able to identify if it's a conflict where your values are just different values, right? And that should be a last resort, where you think you just see the world differently.
Okay.
There's another type of value, we call it pathways value, where you have the same goal, but different ways of looking at it, different ways of approaching it, right? You both want to go to the grocery store. One person wants to drive, one person want to ride bikes,
Sure.
and so
Sure.
that you guys have to figure out that pathway. And then there's
I
like
feel like that's very common, actually.
yeah, right. And then there's like the mutually exclusive one, where the goal is completely different, but you guys can work together to get that goal. In the past, I always talked about voting, but as this year has come up, seems like not that many, like, I idealistically, both parties want people to vote, right? Um, and so this is a bit outdated, and because it will bring up more voter more people politically active, more people into the political process to be able to get the candidate, but they may not have the same agreement about who should be voted for, right?
Sure, exactly. Gotcha.
Right.
But voting is where we can meet.
Right. Voting is where we can meet and
Gotcha.
where we get those goals done. And then there's distributive. This is the last one, and it's kind of where it's like the lack of resources. Is it just a lack of resources that we have, or is it something where, or the view or the perception of lack of resources, right? So that's where, we can't have Medicare for all because we don't have enough money. But,
Oh,
we could probably take money from so and so organization to make that happen. Lack of resources. So kind
gotcha.
of, you
Sure.
know, um, and then if we're going with the grocery store model again, you come up to somebody, someone takes the last can of honey or something,
Okay.
and they're like, "Oh no, you took my," and that's a conflict, right? Because now you're arguing about this. That could be easily resolved. You can find somebody in the store who maybe have, but just identifying those conflicts.
Gotcha. And to use that example, so let's say somebody does take the honey. I love honey, so
Mhm.
I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say, okay, well, either I'm gonna knock you out, right? So that's a violent option, and I'm gonna take your honey. Uh,
Yeah.
or I'm going to cuss you out, which is a
Yeah.
different level of violence.
Yes.
Or I might give you a little dirty look, right? So we're talking about
Right.
the spectrum of violence.
Yeah.
Or I could say, hey, I would like that, right? So then this is
Right.
dealing with the problem in a different way. I would
Yes.
like that, honey, please give it to me. They say yes or no or whatever. But then there's also this other option, which I think is this is where we're getting into. We have to think creatively because
Yeah.
a lot of the difficulties that we have, as
Right.
you're saying, is identifying what is our actual problem here,
Yes.
and then how am I going to deal with it? Because there's a spectrum of ways that I can deal with it.
Right.
For
Right.
instance, I could say, I'll go to somebody and see if they have any more in the back. There is no issue here. We're good. There's a lot of honey
Yeah.
in the world. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Will you do me a favor and please
Mhm.
read those three again, please?
Yeah. So the first one is values conflict.
Okay.
Second one is pathways, mutually exclusive, distributive.
Mutually exclusive. So now when I hear mutually exclusive,
Mhm.
do I get to be right in that situation? Do I get to say, so that doesn't work,
Uh,
I'm right?
no, I guess they're just agreeing that there's a mutually beneficial answer to the issue, the goal. So if there's a goals may be different, but you guys can at least come mutually together to
Yes.
get to that goal, right? If you want more equity and justice in society, but the goal is different for whatever race or whatever perspective you have, then that may be a tricky road when you get to that goal, but you guys can work together till that goal happens.
Okay. So we got values, pathways, mutually exclusive, and then what was exclusivity? What was the last one?
Uh Distributive.
Distributive. I want to speak to the mutually exclusive one.
Yes.
Distributive. I was able to see Malcolm X's grandson speak actually here in Santa Cruz, which was
Very
very
cool.
interesting. And he is a controversial figure
Mhm.
as well. He is no longer alive, unfortunately. But one of the things that stuck out in my mind that he said, because he was, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he
Mhm.
was very much um, saying that his grandfather wasn't gay because that's one of the ways that people tried to discredit him. And then so some people in the audience said to him, well, you're anti-gay and do. And I don't know whether any of that story or perspective is true or not the point at the moment, but what the point is that what he said next was something that I will take with me for my entire future. He said, I don't have to agree with you in order to
Yeah.
build with you. And I was stunned. I was shocked. It was the
Mhm.
first time I had heard anything like that. Even if he was anti-gay, let's just say he was. I
Right.
don't know if he was or not. He was still willing to work with people who were gay in order to make our little world a better place. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuance in that, and we can
Yes.
definitely go into that conversation. But I think that's where sometimes I may be sitting across the table with someone I don't agree with their philosophy. I
Right.
don't agree with the way they move through the world,
Right.
but we're trying to achieve something, and so that's where I need to remember. I
Yeah.
may not even like you,
Yeah.
but we can work together because we're trying to achieve a goal here.
That's probably the biggest lesson I've learned in all of this is you can disagree with people, but if there is a shared goal or a shared way of getting to that goal or anything like that where you can work with somebody, you know, it's worth it, right? Because like, you know, you're always going to be with somebody who disagrees with you. I think that's probably the most reliable thing to think about in your
Yeah,
life
yeah,
because most people will disagree with you if you're doing good stuff in the world,
that's
you
right.
know, because I don't know. When I went to Selma, there's a lot of people who disagreed, who were in even in the training, who I didn't agree with maybe their philosophies on faith, on life, on
Mhm.
different things like that. But I did agree with the principles, these steps, these ways of acting, these ways that Black lives, yes, they do matter and stuff like that. But you know, there were people in there who maybe were more religious in the sense like they don't like you brought up the homosexual thing and they didn't really like that and they don't like all these other elements where maybe I would use these steps to get to. But we found mutual agreement, mutual understanding where yes, we can build something together without having to maybe agree on our values and our lifestyle. And I think that is really important because you know, we live in a world of diversity and that's a good
Yes,
thing.
yes,
It's just we need to learn how to communicate with each other and handle conflict better, handle suffering better, handle these issues that for a long time, a lot of people have just reacted to. You know, when something bad happens to you, we react. We're not trained to go a different route. You know, we're not trained yet to go like to breathe, check in. Maybe some of us are, but not the majority of us are where to breathe, check in and see like, wait, are what are they saying? Just really what they are saying. Is it true? Is it, really trying to balance the facts and really manage your emotions and have emotional intelligence around that.
emotional intelligence. I think that's one of the founding concepts to a new spiritual mentality, to a new global mentality.
That's
What
right.
is happening inside of my system right now?
And that roots right back, to the attack the forces of evil, not the people doing the evil, right? In like I said, evil is a strong word.
Yeah,
It's just more of like if you disagree with them, ideal like their selves or how they communicate with you, have some compassion and see if you can find mutual ground and go from there. And yes, we're in really bumpy waters right now where everyone feels we have to do extreme things to make change. But I would ask them where in history has violence and 100% extreme behavior made a good change, and a
great
civil
question.
rights movement is where my mind first goes, but even
Sure.
that was trained, that was intentional. Those, Rosa Parks didn't just get tired at work and put her feet up and was like, "Oh, I'm too tired to get up," and that's like the narrative they teach in schools till this
Yeah,
day. I
yeah,
had to re-educate my student about that
yeah.
recently. No, that was intentional. She was tired of white supremacy. I mean, that was the truth, you
I
know?
had to re-educate my daughter on that recently.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's a big deal. And so
yeah.
just understanding that, right? That, extreme things, we need to we need to kind of step away from that and think more creatively about how we go forward from here.
We do, and we only have a few more minutes. This is a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. We could talk about so many different things, and
Oh
I
man, and I'm not
appreciate.
yeah. It's
I love
crazy.
talking with you. So in our final few minutes, did were there more principles that you wanted to lay
Yeah,
out?
there's two more.
Okay,
So this I think you'll like this one. Avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. So that's the fifth one. So avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence.
that's such a full yes for me. I mean,
Yes.
personally, I feel like that's my mo these days.
Yep.
But maybe if you would say a little bit more for what does that internal violence mean?
And I think that's up for the individual to understand. We all have different forms of trauma and things. And I think self care, I know that's like a hashtag word, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Self-care, you know, but I think really taking care of yourself, checking in with yourself, understanding if you're doing anything to really harm yourself in your world, in your reality, because I think that is, you know, are you criticizing yourself too much? Are you feeling too impacted? You know, are you judging yourself way too, you know, all
Uh-huh.
those different elements. And yeah, as well as external physical violence. So it's just letting you know that physical violence is not the only type of violence you should be looking at.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you.
And then the last one is the one I've had to wrestle with. And I in the actual training, I was arguing a lot with this one, and is the universe is on the side of justice. And that's the last one.
Yeah, what does that
And
even mean, man?
yeah, so how I understand it, I had to really dive deep in the word of justice and what that means. And I think justice to me means balance, you know, and how the Taoists believe in balance. And I think when we live in an equitable society, and I think the world is always trying, or the earth or the universe is always trying to balance itself. You know, when things are out of whack, when it's a society's too patriarchal, there's always going to be elements that fight back. You know, even if you have to look at the big picture of the universe. For me personally, some people take this as face value. The universe is on the side of justice. I had to just dive really deep into it because I was like, well, there's wars. Like people were taken from Africa to be enslaved in the United States of America. You know,
Sure.
I don't know if that's true, but at the same time, look at us now, right? We're creating a new thing, and so it's kind of you have to for me, it's this really comes down to faith. It really comes down to faith.
That's a big one. That
Yeah.
is a big one. The universe is always on the side of justice. So, you know, when you say faith, instantly I think of Dr. King,
Yeah.
Reverend King,
Yep, that's correct.
in that he was a Christian man, and that was his whole deal.
Yep.
He was a preacher.
Right.
And from that, he had a level of faith that was seemingly unshakable. And I feel like, you know, we're talking to a lot of different people right now. And, you know, maybe all different faiths or non-faiths are represented right now. And so I feel like this is one of the crucial understandings about Martin Luther King, is that in his Christianity, he believed a certain thing.
Right.
And this I think speaks to that, and it's challenging,
It's very
especially
challenging.
for someone who doesn't have uh, spiritual, religious aspirations or beliefs. What the heck is faith?
Yeah.
What is the universe? You know, what is
Yeah.
the Godhead? I mean, we can go down that road
Yeah.
deeper, but that can be very challenging for someone to say, to not look at it at face value and say, well,
Yeah.
I'm looking around in my world
Yep.
and this isn't pretty. So
Yeah.
how am I going to believe that?
Yeah, and see that is you're sounding like me at the training. And I remember the trainer just being like, "Oh, that's a good question." You know, trying to figure out an answer. And to be honest, the answer I had to figure out for myself. It took days, if not a month, to really digest that for me, that last principle. I was kind of like, uh, but that being said, think about Malcolm X, think about King. Both of them had a level of faith. They were both religious men, in how they preached, how they worked, Muslim and Christianity, right? And this idea that you kind of have to have something to believe to do this fight, right? And
Sure.
you have to understand, you have to be what I call radically optimistic, and that's the idea of, yeah, right.
Radically optimistic.
Or courageously optimistic. I mean, however way you want to look at it, because a lot of people tell me, well, that's not realistic. And I'm like, you know what? If I believe, if I have trust that the universe is on my side, if I'm pursuing justice or I'm pursuing equitable beliefs, I can do anything, and I am not a Christian. I was raised Catholic, and I'm definitely not a Christian, but I have spiritual beliefs. I do see things in my life. I know there's something bigger than myself.
Sure.
And so I trust that system. And when you look at nature, just go out in nature. Nature's always constantly balancing itself, trying to find, things grow up, things die, life comes out of growth. You know, it's all there in nature. If you go out in nature and you really observe what is happening, then yes, I believe Earth, and we are part of Earth. Don't get that wrong. We're not, maybe other people believe otherwise, but we are animals. We are connected with this earth. So balance is key. And I think balance and justice are very similar concepts to in my mind.
Balance and justice being similar concepts. I love that. And I love that you're, waxing poetic. This is where I feel like we can't just stay on the surface.
It's impossible.
It is impossible, because once you start to look internally, once you start to look really, as you said, the big picture, the big picture externally, you have to start to question the fabric of reality and what it is that we're actually doing here. And when one of the principles you were mentioning, the cause, accept suffering without retaliation for the, I think, benefit of the cause. What is the cause? Why are we here? What am I doing? What is my life's purpose? What is the point? And that's why I wanted to have you here today, so that we could share with each other this knowledge and share with everyone else strategy to move up, to come up within ourselves and with our beloved community. Being all the world, all of nature.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think of these principles, right? These principles as kind of, how like warriors think of codes, right? Like I'm thinking like the samurai Bushido code or something, where these are things that if you go through your life with these principles in your own understanding of them, you will make change in your environment and in your life and in different situations. Definitely organizing. And it's unfortunate we didn't get to go over the steps of nonviolence, because I feel like that is key to any kind of like that's where the surface level comes in. If you think of the principles are kind of just like the general umbrella of what this is, right? Everything is connected through the principles. The steps are the things that are like the meat of what we do. And there's only 6 of them. I can just tell you the titles of them if you want, but if we're out of time, I completely understand. I can just send them to you and you can put them wherever.
I think you should definitely tell me the steps, but I'm kind of thinking that we need to have another, because there's a lot to this.
Yeah,
there's a lot to this, and this is an ongoing conversation. I mean, you've just filled up my mind with so many different concepts, and to be honest, there's some of this that I might have to sit with for a minute, just as you were saying with the justice.
It took me a long time for that last one,
and this is where the courage comes in, because I have to do something. I have to move a little bit. Social justice, the world doesn't just get better if I sit on a mountaintop and meditate. I have to interact with people. What am I gaining from my meditation? What am I gaining from my faith, from my beliefs, whatever? And then spreading it out into the world, So go ahead. Let me hear some steps of nonviolence.
Okay, so I'll just give you the steps. I won't go in deep, but the first step is information gathering. The second one is education. Third one is personal commitment. The fourth one is negotiation. The fifth one is direct action. And the last one's reconciliation.
Okay, see, this is messed up, because now I want to know about every single one of those, and we are completely out of time. So, Thomas Pedersen, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today.
Of course.
Thank you for the laughs. Thank you for filling my heart and my spirit and my mind right now. Thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you for everyone for joining us. I did see in the chat that somebody did write. Hold on one second. Let's see. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. That's it. The one.
That's it.
Live together as brothers and sisters and people. Yes, absolutely. Well, Thomas, thank you so much.
Hey, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll be talking to you again so we can get some steps in nonviolence training. Yes, my brother. Well, you have a great day, and happy Black History Month. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye. I say you, hey, my friend. So even though
Of the day and tomorrow, I still have a dream. And if the dream keeps this, it's the American dream.